Thank you very much for inviting me. Very great. As Susie said, the work I'm going to describe today is work I've been involved in a long time. It goes back to, my interest goes back to my clinical psychology training about 25 years ago. And one of the experiences I had was, can you hear me? Was, okay. I might have to hold this, I think. That might help. Shall I do that? That's better, is it? Okay. During my clinical psychology training, I had to do some testing of an older man who was suspected of having dementia. And then I had to meet with him and his wife and feed back the results and give them the diagnosis, effectively. And it was in one of those big old hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, next to Fringe and London. And I had nothing to offer them except for the information leaflet. And then I watched them through the window, walking away in the rain. And I felt very affected by that experience, and I never forgotten it. Not much has changed, really, I don't think. There's some change. There's lots of examples of very good practice all around the country. But there is a push to diagnose people with dementia earlier. And we have a new cohort of people diagnosed earlier. But there isn't much in terms of therapeutic, psychotherapeutic interventions that are available. Well, why should we be interested in supporting a couple relationship in dementia? Just looking briefly at what the research tells us. Studies show that providing carers with emotional support delays admission to residential care by an average of 500 days, for example. Research also shows that loss of intimacy in the relationship is associated with carer-partner depression, and that low levels of positive interaction between the partners in the relationships of people with dementia predict the move to residential care and even mortality rates. Research also shows that closer relationships are associated with slower decline in Alzheimer's disease, and this effect is highest in people relationships. Now, what I'm saying today could extend to other relationships. I'm going to be talking about couples, but I'm really talking about the importance of a relational approach. That is, the importance of our recognizing that our relationships matter and really need to be taken into account. So I'm going to be describing an approach to working with couples where one partner has a dementia that we're developing at the Tavistock Centre with support from Camden Council's Innovation Fund. And as we've developed it so far, it's a structured intervention. It draws on psychological, psychodynamic thinking. Sorry, my glasses are falling windows. They're a new acquisition. And approaches developed in working with parents and children, which emphasise the importance of observation and which use video as a part of their approach. These approaches are called parenting and psychotherapy, video interaction guidance. There are various approaches. But our aim is to help people with dementia and their partners to manage the experience of the diagnosis, the loss, the changes it brings, and to help the couple as much as possible to maintain or recover the protective aspects of the relationship, which the research indicates are to do with emotional contact and understanding, shared activity and involvement, and the overall quality of the relationship. For this to function as a protective factor and as a resource able to survive and to contain the care needs of the person with dementia depends on the resilience of the couple and on finding ways to support this. So we've developed a training in the manual, and it's an 8 to 10 session intervention with the possibility of ongoing follow-up. And we found that seeing people roughly every 3 or 4 weeks or so works well, so that our involvement with people extends over roughly a sort of 8-month period, with the possibility of extending beyond that. These days, there's such a sort of sense of an acute model, doing things short term, but I think it is quite important to be involved with people over the longer term, if we possibly can, just to turn the page. So, as I said, my interest in this area started off in working in hospital settings, and back then, I think it was particularly true that you could feel that there was little place for thinking about the meaning of behaviour and the communications, the meaning of the communications of people with dementia. And this fueled my interest in the value of an approach which seeks to understand underlying anxieties and feelings, and which gives us a model, a way of thinking about how important it is that our feelings are taken in and understood for all of us throughout our lives. That being taken in, being understood, is very important in terms of the security of our attachment to others and our sense of the security of our worlds. So the point I'm making today is the relevance of an approach which puts a value on understanding and containing feelings in dementia, where it's the capacity to think, to understand, to remember, which is gradually being lost. But just how very difficult this can be, whether for formal care staff or for partners in relationships of many years standing. How they themselves need support and containment of their feelings in order to be better able to do this with their partners as the illness progresses. When people are facing anxieties or confusion or loss of memory, there's a tremendous need, I think, to encounter a mind or a mindful environment, a thoughtful environment. And too often, certainly historically, there can be what a colleague of mine has called a malignant mirroring, a premature sort of foreclosure of meaning in the environment of caregiving. And in dementia care, there's often an inverse relationship between how much support staff receive, for example, and how close to the front line of service delivery they are. Those most in need often receive least. This is corrosive to people with dementia themselves, to staff, and to the couple relationship. And I think it can be one of the bleakest aspects of dementia. So I'm going to describe the intervention now, drawing on some case examples, and talking about some of the themes that come up as part of the work. So in the initial phase of the work, after diagnosis, the emphasis is trying to engage the couple, to explore their experiences, and to contain feelings. Couples and families are having to manage anxiety, and dementia may carry all kinds of worries, fears about what it means to be being looked after in due course. It is very important, I think, to say that for the most part we may be working with couples who never would have come for help had it not been for the dementia. It's coping with the illness that is brought. But of course, for any of us, an illness or trauma, anything that happens, it's going to land on other things, other difficulties that we've had, or other issues that we've struggled with. If we think, I don't know how much people know about it, if we think of what we call containment, what I mean by that is really the taking in and processing, thinking about experience, and trying to find some way of showing that we've understood the other person. I think it's probably true to say that we all need to feel understood. My experience of working with couples at all ages is that people get upset and find it difficult when their partner doesn't understand them, when they don't feel understood in the relationship. And this model really has the idea that we all need, very profoundly, have a profound need to be understood, you know, from our babyhood right throughout our lives, and in our relationships this is very important. So I think it's important for couples facing the diagnosis of dementia that such a containing mind is available. When partners who may have contained each other throughout their relationships, throughout their marriages, are becoming less able to do so. The partner who does not have dementia may find it hard to bear feelings, such as anger and disappointment, particularly perhaps at a time when their partner is more vulnerable. And if we look back at the research, it suggests that containment at this point may set the stage for what happens later on, with the finding that providing carers with emotional support earlier on delays admission to residential care later on. Okay. But having said that, I think the point is that it can be very difficult. It's really important, I think, to recognise the challenge facing people and the importance of not glossing over or idealising what's possible. And I think this draws our attention to the importance of the state of mind of the carer partner. I don't like that phrase terribly much, and some people really don't like it, but I can't think of a better one, so I will use it this afternoon. The person without dementia. The carer partner may have all kinds of feelings towards the individual with dementia in their care, apart from straightforwardly compassionate ones, such as at times resentment, anger, or frustration. And these feelings might arouse guilt or anxiety. There may be a great need for help or containment of this. But approaches to interventions to helping carers generally don't address this more difficult area. One person said to me, "There are all these images everywhere of rosy carers on all the leaflets, but it's not like that a lot of the time. A lot of the time it's shit, and it's like no one can tell the truth. How shit it is and resentment. What do I do with that?" People often don't have much of a model to help them to understand these feelings. And there's often a lot of guilt and shame that they should be feeling like that. And I think this highlights the importance of being able to talk to somebody non-judgmentally, to have somebody else to take in the feelings. This can be a huge thing in itself. For somebody, a counsellor or a therapist or somebody else, to be able to acknowledge, take in, and understand feelings that people might feel very ashamed of having. I have come across books which resort to exhortation to the person without dementia to embrace the changes associated with dementia. One person we saw, whose husband was in the more advanced stages of dementia, spoke of how she felt that everyone expected her to be a saint. They weren't interested in what she felt about how hard it was. No one's interested, she said. They don't know what it's like. Now, this was a very difficult relationship, and it had at times been violent. And in my contact with them, I felt, and this went right for many, many years, I thought how important it was to have a picture of their interaction and understanding this. Their marriage had always been a difficult one. Looking after him repeated for her a version of her experience as an only child, whose mother had developed profound mental health problems after the death of her father. Then, as now, she felt left alone with a burden, with no one able to understand how difficult it was for her. In recent months, his dementia progressed significantly. Increasingly, he responded to the anxiety of not knowing what to do, moments when he is disoriented by getting angry. And for her, it was much like the angry exchanges they'd had for years, and she would tend to get very cross with him. And this was worst at times when he was in a panic and feeling lost. And I saw how she'd tell him things that he couldn't understand. And he'd respond by saying he didn't know what she was talking about. She wasn't making any sense. And then, because it felt so familiar, so much like the kind of arguments they've always had, she would get critical and angry with him. And it was when she did that, when she got very critical and angry, at the points when he was most vulnerable, that then it would get worse. He would say, "You're not making sense." And you could see how the tension just escalated between them. Now, the thing that made the difference wasn't telling her she should be doing it differently. It was sitting with her and listening to her about her experiences, trying to take them in over time. And once she felt somebody could listen to her and really appreciate how she was feeling, she started to get less worked up. She was more able to listen and think about what her partner's experiences were. And I think it's very important for us to think about the experience of the diagnosis and to give people a chance to explore what that's like. One couple gave a very powerful glimpse of how difficult this had been. Since the diagnosis and in the period leading up to it, Brian had been very depressed. He said to me, "When the diagnosis was made, we cried every day, and then every other day, and then you kind of get on with it." But he said, "What's so difficult is the hatred that I have for what's happening, for the people that don't have this, the hatred that I feel in here." "I'm angry. It's so hard to have that inside you." Then he became very distressed. "I want understanding, but I don't feel I get it." He said there was a painful period leading up to the diagnosis. First, the doctors thought it was depression, then pseudo-dementia, and then when the diagnosis came, in a way it was a relief. But the diagnosis is hard. I feel normal, and then it comes back in. I'm reminded of it. And so his wife added, "It's difficult for us to think about things like this. Painful for me too." And needless to say, how difficult. But under these circumstances, having somebody around to help them to think about it seemed to make a real difference to their capacity. And I'll come back and tell you a bit more about this in a minute. I'll just give one more example. One couple described being caught between two worlds. They were sort of holding onto their old world, their life as it had always been, but they were also feeling confronted by the new world of dementia. And they talked about how they didn't know where to place themselves between the world of dementia, as they put it, which was represented for them by the offer of an Alzheimer's Society trip, and the prospect of travelling across the country to go to a family wedding. This was their old world. She spoke of how she felt that his dementia diagnosis was like an alien intrusion. And she said, and then so is the things we're given. I don't want to offend anyone, but we have people phoning up, wanting us to sign up for things, but we aren't ready, and it isn't what we want at the moment. Coach trip to Clapton isn't us. They'd always been a very private couple. She said, I want to keep control, and I don't want other people coming in and telling us what we should be doing. It's an intrusion into how we've always been. And this very lovely person has visited, but she wanted to give us things, leaflets, things to do. People need to be allowed to go at their own pace, to have things available that they can call on if they want to, when they're ready. Otherwise, it's like being taken over by it, she said. And she said, it was a difficult year till we came to terms with the diagnosis. We had the wedding, but at times it was quite overwhelmed when we were there. And there was also the Alzheimer's Society trip to Hever Castle. I don't want to cause offence, but it isn't a welcome picture. It isn't helpful at the moment. In 2 or 3 years' time, maybe, but not now. I think the point about that is that we've really found how important it is to try to meet people where they are emotionally, to try to understand their world, what they feel they need at that point. And again and again, the people we work with have spoken of being bombarded. As I said, these people coming and going with their leaflets, their forms to fill in, saying I should apply for this or that. I don't know who they are or why they're coming half the time, traipsing through here. They phone up, say it's so-and-so calling, and I don't know. I don't know them. Every time it's a different person. I got really cross with someone yesterday who came. Hopefully I stopped it for now. We need one person who we can build a relationship with. I just don't want any more information, leaflets or forms. It's traumatic. Now I'm not saying, of course, it's very important to give people information, absolutely. But I think sometimes there might be a pressure to act, for the staff going in to see people, to want to give something like a leaflet or information when the staff themselves feel helpless, that they don't really have anything to offer, or the limits of what can be done to make things better. And this can place people, can place couples in a position where they may have to take something that they don't feel ready for, which is more about the staff's need to relieve their own anxiety. And my experience of working with staff in frontline settings is how little support they have to help them with to stay in the emotional experience that people are looking after. Now, just thinking about how the dementia, the diagnosis can land on the couple. I'll just say a little bit about how we start to try and understand that and work with the couple. So we might try to ask, what are the issues that feel to be important in the relationship? Now, one of the things that's important, I think, to say is that we're not trying to train people to make very clever interpretations or comments. The important thing is felt to be being curious about what's happening, showing curiosity and interest, and conveying the idea that there's a lot to think about in terms of people's feelings and experiences. And how many people have spoken about, and carer partners, often the men, have spoken about how the dementia has brought a kind of change around. She used to look after me, now I have to look after her, something people often said. One man said, when we first got together, I used to be more shut off. My experience of being with her helped me change. She's always been so thoughtful, but now she withdraws more. It used to be me who was the one who was shut down, but now it's switched around, and she's the one who's more like I used to be. Now we're crossing over into opposite places. It's also true to say that we've worked with a number of people who've said that more things have become possible since the diagnosis, that they've actually managed to find more intimacy than they had before. And I think that's just an important point to make when I'm talking about all the difficulties I'm describing. In the work we've done, our impression has been that one of the protective factors for the relationship is the carer's capacity still to be interested in what their partner might be feeling, able to see meaning in their partner's behaviour. And I'll just give one more example. This is the couple, coming back to the couple I mentioned a few minutes ago. People may recognise coming up against complaints which get repeated and which the carer partners can be wary. Things are going missing, being broken into. For example, one couple, the female partner, complained about what she called losing her valuables, her jewellery. And her husband found the repetition of the same complaint extremely frustrating and tended to withdraw and disengage in response. Part of the work of this couple was to try to think about whether, alongside the real frustration of losing these actual objects, there may also be something being communicated that perhaps centred around the losses that they were facing together. After some time, there were shifts. For example, she started talking about the loss of her dreams. I miss my dreams. Since the dementia, I don't remember them anymore. They used to be so vivid, and often I would write them down. But now I can't catch hold of them. And as we worked together, there was a lessening of her sense of being so gripped by these complaints, and a shift to a more poignant expression of her feelings about the precious things she was losing. I can be feeling normal, and then I lose my jewellery, and it's like the dementia crashing in. It's the loss of my mind that I'm seeing. In parallel with this, he seemed to become more interested in thinking about what might be going on in his life, to be curious about a possible meaning behind what would seem, on the face of it, to be meaningless accusations and complaints coming out of the blue. Whereas before, these almost always provoked anger and frustration in him. I've just got to block it out. She's driving me mad. He seemed to be able to have more space, at times, to take in her distress and to offer her reassurance. They began to cope with complaints in various ways. For example, setting a time limit in which they would look for the jewels together, which had a calming effect, and finding perspex boxes to enable her better to see where things were. There was also more transparent communication about the losses within the relationship. He spoke more of what he couldn't hold on to with her. She's the most precious thing to me, and I'm frightened I won't be able to find her again, even for short times. I think that being able to know about his own loss and having someone to talk to him about this allowed him to be more available to her experience, to contain it better. He said, I can't say it'll be all right, but I'll be alongside you. We'll go through it together. She responded, we're having a very open discussion now. This is the antithesis of the dementia, which makes me feel so hemmed in. Interestingly, at this point in the work, I heard that she returned to reading novels, something she hadn't done since the diagnosis, but which had always been important to her. Perhaps this example reflects the difficulty of the couple of the loss of what's so precious, which is a sense of meaning to their actions, and conveys something of a recapturing of that meaning, if you like. Now, this may be fleeting, but if there can be kept alive a sense of the meaning behind behaviour or interactions, it's a reminder of humanity. It helps to keep alive a sense of the person. And I think this is so important for everybody, the person with dementia, for the couple relationship, and for staff working with dementia. And it's this capacity to observe and pick up meaningful communications when they happen that is the focus of our use of video. So I'm now going to say something about the video aspect of the intervention. Well, why video? The aim is to help the couple or the carer partner to become observers of themselves, and the focus is on finding a meaning in everyday things. We found the video to be a very powerful tool in helping the couple to observe what's going on between them, to get them to a different state of mind, able to stand back and to begin to question, or become interested. Why are things happening in this particular way between us, for example? The idea is that the couple can be helped to begin to think about everyday activities as opportunities for becoming more involved before the dementia becomes too advanced. This may be protective and give strategies and understanding that can be helpful later on. The activities that we video can seem mundane and everyday, but being able to find new meaning, new ways of thinking, precisely grounded in daily living, I think is very important. I think for all of us in our relationship, and it's certainly true of me, things can easily become very calcified between a couple. He or she is just simply like that. There's nothing to think about. My wife's just impossible about certain things. But having a chance to see it at one remove is very helpful in terms of getting a sense of what's going on. New things can be noticed, and our sense is that this can support new ways of thinking. So we try to think of very ordinary, everyday things that people might do together. So we'll say something like, we'd like you to work together as a team. Can you think of something that needs to be done around the house? For example, cleaning the fridge. Something that feels natural for the couple. So the approach is both structured, so we'll give particular techniques for people to try out. But the aim is not really about doing the activity at all. It's about helping people to use the activity as something that they can do together. And there's often a way in then to help people think about their feelings. And it's important that we spend time with both partners, both together and each partner separately. And sometimes people need to feel that they can say things privately that they will find more difficult to say to their partner. But the idea is that we take a short video and then show it back to the couple and go through the video and find moments that we find where there's a moment of emotional contact, for example, between the partner, and maybe another moment where something's a bit more difficult. And we use that as a way of helping them to think about what's going on. Okay, you with me? Does this make sense? So I'll give a couple of examples of this, and then I'm going to show a very brief video and then so on. So this was one of the very, very first videos that we did. I was working with a couple, and I just done the first video, and I was very pleased with it. And then I got a phone call from the parent partner to say, I shouldn't come back, just don't bother. I said, you know. And I talked to her a bit on the phone, and she said, well, look, you can come back this once, and let's see. So I went back, and I showed her a snippet of she and her husband looking at photographs together. And I found that when I showed her the video and pointed out examples of her husband's competence, the things that he was really able to do, she was really taken with that example of capacity, things that she just hadn't noticed. But also, what I was showing her was something that she had really learned to do. Because up until now, she tended to be very sort of, how can I say this without saying, she had a kind of schoolmarm sort of approach to him, saying, what's this? Can you tell me this? And it used to be very off-putting for him. So we talked to her a bit about that. And she had been, she really listened to what we talked about. And in the video, she was able, instead of questioning him about his memory, she was able to look at the photographs and tell him about something she remembered. And when she did that, it stimulated his memory. And he was able to say, oh yeah, that reminds me of this. And it was a very moving, I thought, moment of contact between them. And she was very taken by that. And she continued, you know, and the two of them continued working through the intervention. Now, I've emphasized the positive things. There was another time we did a video together where she showed a moment of frustration. So this is an example of their cleaning the fridge together. And what we found when we looked at the video was there were some lovely moments between them. But there was also a moment where he was putting things back into the fridge, and you could see he was putting them just in the wrong places. And you could see how tense she was getting, and because I was there, she was having to do this, to put in the bag. And then at one moment, she just sort of went like this. And so, but she was somebody who found it very difficult to talk about her frustrations. So we showed her that glimpse of her just looking quite frustrated. And it allowed her to start talking to me about it, how difficult it was. And it put her more in touch with how sad some things were, you know, to talk about the losses, the changes, but also to start thinking about the things that she did have with him, what was still possible between them now. In fact, when we showed the video back to the two of them, she was initially quite critical, and I thought, okay, you know, the aim wasn't to be, you know, critical of him, it was really critical of him, it makes things more difficult. But actually, it was the whole exercise led to a really interesting moment between them, because he was a chap who would never normally have gone anywhere near the fridge, I have to say. And he was looking at this saying, well, you know, what am I doing? And how strange that here I am, you know, being involved in the kitchen. She had never really let him into the kitchen in all the years. And there was something about the humour around in that interaction between them that really felt that it was a very sort of truthful and open moment of emotional contact between them. But there were shifts in this couple as we went along. She was frustrated about other things. One was his complaints about his tinnitus. And sometimes the complaints between them could feel like a sort of terrible noise between them. But there were shifts happening. He was a chap who had always been described as being hidden behind a book, shut off and withdrawn. But he was described by her as emerging more. So seamlessly I moved to, sorry, forgive me, I just went out. Here we go. Okay. So he was described as emerging more. You know, he'd always been withdrawn, reading books. He didn't move much out of his chair. But she described how he came into the kitchen and said, "Is there anything I can do?" And she thought he was making a link with the work he'd been doing. He'd never done it before. And she also said that normally, when she brings him tea in bed in the morning, he doesn't say much. But in the last few days, it's been very different. He was chatting away, telling me about what he did, pointing out people walking past, noticing them, saying things like, "He looks a bit funny. It's like having the old Ray back," she said, "like he's still there after all." And this seemed to help her to tolerate the difficulties and her frustrations. And towards the end of the therapy, Ray talks about a softening that seemed linked to a restoration of intimacy, a sense of being more contained by her and by the therapeutic work. Here I think Ray's communicating something like this. He said, "I have moods, particularly when my tinnitus is bad. She treads softly around me. She doesn't say anything. She's quietly responsive. I am a lucky man. My memory is not so good. She helps me. She's my rock. I do fear the couple being broken, not staying. It will come to that." Now I'm just going to make one more really final observation before showing the video. And that is that although there are some really great examples of wonderful practice around the country, I do think it's probably still true to say that there can be a difficulty where institutions and staff are not kind of set up really to think about relationships, couple relationships, family relationships. And that when a partner with dementia is, if they're admitted to residential care, it can sometimes be difficult for them to have a link, continued role in the care of the partner. And I think this can cause problems because there can be a lot of difficult feelings for the partner of the person being admitted. And if there's a difficulty in sustaining involvement and having a place, because the institution isn't set up to think of the couple, I think it can compound the problem of these feelings. Dependency, attachment issues don't stop being relevant when couples get older or face dementia. In fact, I think they're particularly important, whether the couple are living together or apart. And I do think that the situation is a bit like that of the 1950s or early 1960s in children's services, you know, when children were routinely separated from their main caregiver in hospital. Now provision is made for mother or father to stay alongside the child, and together they're seen as the unit of care. The approach of the 1950s now seems archaic to us, yet the recognition of attachment and dependency needs, which is a commonplace nowadays in other areas of care, is not an established part of the thinking in older people's services, where recognition of the couple relationship is largely missing. What wouldn't be tolerated in child and family services is all too common in older adult services, in the world of older couples with dementia, where people can be housed in different places and partnerships of many decades standing can be separated. And I'm going to end with a brief video of a man which conveys this more eloquently than I can. Even though he's physically living in the same care home as his wife who has dementia, he struggled to have his role and their relationship recognised and given a place in that setting. Tell me one step.
When the wife was going to come out of the hospital, it was decided she'd have to go into a home. They said, "Well, we've got to get a carer now, full-time carer for your wife." And I said, "Well, I'll do that." because I was quite happy to look after Joan. I'd been looking after her for 2 years anyway. This staff nurse said, "Do you realise what you're letting yourself in for?" I said, "No, but if I didn't do this, then I'd never forgive myself." So I was in an open book, didn't know what to do, didn't want to know what's on the first page, because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I looked after for 18 months, 16, 18 months as a full carer, and that knocked me to bits, absolutely, in all respects. I was very haggard, I was very upset, I was concerned in as much as Joan didn't seem to be improving at all. Her memory was awful. And I actually wasn't eating what I should be eating. And this affected me tremendously. So I said, well, would it be better if I wasn't here and let them try and cope now with this problem? Because it was affecting me so much.
What sort of ways?
Sorry?
What sort of ways was it affecting you?
Well, I didn't know what to do when I was in this situation. Me being with a person who was admitted and paid for by the state and with our savings, and I was paying full money to the home for my pension and what wasn't available from my pensions. I had to use my savings. All these sort of things and the worries and the pressure was getting to me, and it seemed to be, I wasn't dealing with me, I was dealing with somebody else. And I thought, if I wasn't here, perhaps they'd get more freedom and they could do it another way. So foolishly, one night I decided that I'd cut my veins. And this I did. But I then realised that it wasn't going to work, and I pressed the button and they can't rescue me. And I went to hospital. And that was horrendous. I was so sorry afterwards.
And I think what you're telling me is that it's a measure of how bad you were feeling and how impossible the situation felt for you.
Well, if the situation wouldn't have occurred, if they'd have treated me properly as a carer,
Yes.
because it was that aspect that was causing me to be so distressed
Yes.
all along the. I mean, you realise that I was doing all the house chores, I was shopping, I was doing the washing, I was doing the ironing, I was driving, I was getting food, I was visiting Joan every day, sometimes twice a day. So that was the stress, wasn't it?
So shall I just read that? Yes, could you just go back one? Sorry. So it says, he describes his experience of her memory impairment, moving from the view that she does not any longer know who he is, to telling me of a much more mixed picture, where there are moments of intimacy between them, and where the importance of their being together is clear.
She sometimes, I said to her one day, now, Joan, what are you thinking? I says, who am I? Oh, she said, you're my best friend, she says, my mate. Then she would say, probably an hour later or the next day, she would say, where's my husband? I've not seen him today at all.
I wonder how it feels for you when she doesn't know you, doesn't know who you are.
Well, being as we're still very sentimental, with all the restrictions that's there, I suppose in the course of a day, Joan and I will kiss each other 20 times. Yeah. Yeah. We've always been affectionate.
And I wonder if at some level, there's ways in which she does still respond to you.
Oh, yes.
The way she did.
Yes, yes. I knock on her door and I said, she's like, where have you been? So she knows she's been with me.
Yes.
It's very fluctuating.
Yes.
And it's deceiving. But we're together, that's the main thing, that's what.
That's been very important to you to stay together.
This month is 67 years work, really.
So it says at the other end of the lifespan, in children's services, an understanding of the importance of attachment needs means that nowadays it's the child, mother, or family that form the unit of care. Yet in services for older people, individuals are often treated in isolation. Marriages of 60 or more years may be separated, and there are no psychological interventions designed to help older couples with dementia with the emotional challenges they face.
That's it.
Can I ask if Andrew's happy just to take questions from the floor, if there are any issues that people would like Andrew to expand upon further, either by way of the interventions that you're providing at the Tavistock Centre or elsewhere? Any other questions that you would like to address to Andrew?
Do you want to answer this?
You can give a question back to anyone who's spoken.
Absolutely. That's a really interesting question. So I repeat my understanding of what you're saying is that your thought of using video in your particular relationship to try to show people outside how things were, you felt they didn't really see because when other people were around, things changed. And how do we then deal with the fact that coming in and videoing as outsiders is an intrusion, and therefore do we really get a true picture, I suppose, is partly what you're saying. And I suppose that's inevitably going to be true. We all have to put our best foot forward when people come to town. I suppose we wouldn't just be relying on videos. We'd be talking to people about their experiences and taking very seriously their accounts of what's going on and how they were feeling. Also, the whole business of going in is that we really do get to know people. So that we find that over time people do start to be able to trust and therefore show more openly what's going on and how they're feeling. I think that's really important. And video can seem really odd and off-putting. I'm really a technophobe. I don't like cameras very much myself. It's not like we're coming in with a massive camera with lights and everything. There are these tiny little cameras. They look like mobile phones, and they just go somewhere unobtrusive on top of the telly or something. And we found people get used to them very quickly. I mean, I have to say, in my day job, my other job, we've done videoing of couples in ordinary therapy, and the camera might be rolling as part of looking at the outcome of therapy. And couples always want to say, God, just rewind it, just prove I was right. But mostly people we found have been quite moved actually by seeing themselves, by people showing interest, and it's felt quite important. I sometimes wish we had a video of the couples looking at the videos, because it sometimes really does seem to bring people close. Like the Google Works. Thank you.
I've got a question online here. Okay. Somebody said, can you help with issues of sundowning, putting pressure on the spouse. I'm not sure I know what sundowning means. Is it something to do with problems getting anxious at night time when it's bedtime?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a common enough experience. It's difficult to answer really in the abstract. I mean, we would be trying to... Oh, I'm so sorry. So this is a question about, can we help with issues of sundowning? Just, more agitation happening at a particular time of the day as evening comes. Well, we can try and help people think about what the experience is. We wouldn't necessarily be there at the time, but we'd be helping people to talk about how it makes them feel. We find that, whatever the stress is, if people are able to give voice to their frustrations, their difficulties, their fears and anxieties, it tends to be very helpful. It's when people feel that there is no place or nobody who can really see what's going on for them. It's perhaps a bit like what you're saying, needing the camera, needing somebody to be able to take in what's really going on, whether it's sundowning or something else. And I think that's the point of it. We try the idea of having somebody around who can really listen and try and understand, and then think of strategies, practical strategies as well. But they follow on from trying to understand what the experience is for that person. Does that make sense?
One of the very important things in one of your examples that you gave was about direct questioning and soft questioning, and allowing people to remember stuff, allowing them to go in with a memory that you are sharing with them. Because if you directly say, "What is your name?" they're going to say, "I have no idea," and get distressed. Whereas if you say, "Do you remember going to?" or something like that, they can either pretend to or actually remember it. And I've certainly found that my mother, if I share a memory with her, she will react in a way that is not offensive or emotional, but she has no faculties at all. And somebody's like, I can share memories with her, and I can see that she's still there. I believe she's still there.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I agree. Shall I just repeat that? I think you're drawing attention to the difference between sort of testing somebody's memories and do you remember this, do you remember that, sort of instrumental kind of questioning, and being able to find a way of just making contact by supplying your own thoughts, your own memories, and then giving them the opportunity to have whatever reaction they have. It might be that it makes a connection, makes a contact, and then there's something to recover. So it's that kind of thing in terms of practical strategies that we do look at. But it's looking very closely at the interaction to try and think, well, what's happening there? What were you feeling there? What was going? So that people get more of a chance to process and think about what's going on between them. Slowing things down is another thing that can be very important, which goes along with what you're saying. But you use the word softening. I think that's important to this. Shall I give you this? And then
Okay. Can I just ask about access to the Tavistock services? What is the availability? How do people get access to, say, services at the Tavistock? Does it have to be a referral from somebody in the Camden area? Does it have to be to a GP, a hospital? Or how is it done? Because one of the problems with people is often accessing the right thing. Things are out there, people don't know about them, they don't know how to access it, and it'll be very, very difficult to find how to access it.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody heard that. Well, look, in terms of this, access can be any route. People can self-refer. There's a stack of leaflets actually on the front, so please do take them. And if you're interested, or if you know anybody who might be, please do distribute them. People can just ring up and speak to the person who administers the whole project, and we'll take it from there. We'll phone them back and talk to them, and then go and visit, and just talk it through with people. We feel it's very important that it's a big thing to allow somebody into your sort of private space, your relationship. But we do find that once people kind of see one of us and get to meet, then they might be more open to it. But we'll go and so the idea of the access is via phone call. People can drop in if they want to, and then we'll phone up and arrange a time to visit you at home. That's the way it works, and take it from there. People after that visit are still interested, then we'll arrange to come and see them again. We're offering it from the Tavistock Centre for Couple Relationships, which is around the corner in Warren Street. Access and knowing what's going on is as you're saying, a difficult thing. We're also really keen to get the message out there. because if people do come in, they will also be helping us. Because I've spent many years of my life trying to get funding for this, and we're very fortunate that we have had funding from Camden Council. It does mean that, unfortunately, this is restricted to Camden residents at the moment. So that's a big limit, a big bar on access, and I know not everybody here is from Camden by any means. But we do really hope, I mean, I have spent decades working on this, getting this far, and we do plan that the next phase will be, further afield in Camden. But if you know anybody in Camden, or if you're from Camden and you're interested, please do pick up a flyer and just give us a ring. There's no strings attached. We'll just come and meet you and see what you think.
I can move across the road.
Yes, well, it's very tempting to get very blurry about postcodes, I have to say.
Oh, we're really embarrassed. This is about relationships. My wife is now in a care home, and when she was first in there, it was always very difficult for me to leave. She didn't want me to leave. Can't think why. So I would often stay with her until she went to sleep, and then leave. That wasn't too successful either, but I was thinking, why don't I just bring an airbed in and sleep with her? And then she won't be, it will be more blurred about whether I'm there or not and what I'm doing. Because often she'll ask me what I was doing. Where have you been? What have you been doing? When I come to see her after a day or two. So is that the sort of thing that you're talking about in this film?
Yes.
Because it seems like a very natural thing.
Yes.
In the same way that keeping children and parents together when the child broken their leg or something.
Yes, thank you for that. It is exactly what I mean. And not to force it on people, but it's more just that some people might want to be further apart, they might need it. But that people ought to have the choice, I think. When they want to, when they're able to, and when they feel to be able to stay outside. Yeah. No. Well, that's I think what I meant when I said that it's like the 1950s, really, in terms of other areas of care. It's obvious the research evidence is there. We all know from experience that what you're saying is right, but it's just there's a catch-up needs to happen.
One last question.
There's something that I felt is quite important, where it's a sort of extension of what we're doing. And the recent accounts of quite terrible events in homes have sort of highlighted it. I think caring is incredibly difficult. And I think people who are in homes and institutions have their work cut out. And an awful lot of people there are not actually really natural carers. And I think some of the examples of the videos we saw recently of women being thrown around in the bed, it's been quite clear that the people there probably couldn't care less. And in a way, we need to try and support people who are playing that role in homes. And even those who are very caring, to recognise that they have an incredibly difficult job. And what we seem to have is this massive reaction, oh, this terrible incident happened, these people were being badly treated by these people in these homes, without thinking, these carers are human beings themselves. They need support. They're often very lowly paid, and they're completely unsupported, I feel. And then they get it when something goes wrong, and then it's terrible, and then there's a prosecution and so on. And actually, they need care in order to care. And I think that's really so important. I think that's a huge failure of the system. And I think it's just as important as caring for the people who have these conditions. Yes. They can care for the carers in these institutions, because then they can care better than they do at the moment.
Look, I'm so glad you said that. And, it's a good maybe to end on that. I entirely agree. It is implicit in what I'm saying. I didn't make it more explicit, maybe. But it's a sort of Russian doll model of containment I'm talking about. That people need, people who are caring need to be cared for, in a sense, and that staff in frontline settings, as you're describing, where dreadful things go wrong, it's not rocket science. You know, if unsupported carers are in highly pressurized situations, in very, very demanding roles, with very powerful emotions evoked in them, in their role, the danger is that they're going to react. They're going to act out rather than being able to process and contain the feelings. In order to do that, in order to be supported to do that, they need a lot of support. We know that. It's what I did say is there's often an inverse relationship between how close to the front line staff are and how much support they get. The further away you are, the more support you get. The nearer you are, the less. And that's the problem. And we know it. And it's a sort of failure of thinking strategically that that's not attended to. And I agree. Then people end up being blamed and vilified, and it doesn't help solve the problem. So it's something that badly needs addressing.
Thank you very much indeed. Just in view of the time, and I know some people do have commitments that we have to leave for, I do want to kind of bring things to something of a close. I want first of all though to thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. I think one of the things that really struck me as a nurse, we often talk about kind of dementia care being 30 years behind the cancer care model and how we ought to strive for that sort of level of provision that we see now in people who get a diagnosis of cancer. But actually it was a really interesting comparison to hear you speak about the sort of link with children and the way emotional attachment and dependency in children 30 years ago, 40 years ago was managed so differently. So that was a really helpful link and comparison for me to make. I don't want people to feel in any way that they need to dash off. The room is booked for another half hour if people want to stay, and if there's anything left to eat or drink, please feel free to do so. I think at the end of a day like this, it's always really important to sort of make the point that people get different things out of meetings like this, and we're all at different places in our journey with a diagnosis of PCA. Some of what we've heard will be relevant for now, and some of what we've heard might be relevant in the future. So hold what you've heard and take what you can that's relevant and appropriate for you. Don't feel that there's anything that's been said that you can't discuss with any of the members of staff here, or follow up with an email to me subsequently. Please don't go away from here feeling that there's anything you wish you could have discussed about further. So you know my email address, you know my phone number. If there's anything you want to follow up on from today, I'm available. Otherwise, I thank you for your time, for your participation, and these meetings only work because you turn up, so thank you, especially if you've come for the first time today. I really hope that this will be a place that you feel you will come back to and meet with us again. So it just remains for me to wish you a safe journey, safe travels, and this is the slide I always show. I know it's kind of one that you've probably seen before, but I think it conveys two powerful messages, and they are the messages really that make a support group like this worth having and worth doing. So I hope that as long as that is our sort of raison d'etre, we'll continue to meet like this. So look to everybody and safe travels. Thank you.
Thank you.